Hi everyone. Just to remind you that your microphone will be muted during all the presentation. Now I will let you know the structure we are going to follow. First, we got Juan, who is our first speaker, who is going to talk about the strategic view. Then we are going to listen to Álvaro, who is going to do a quick demo, and the conclusion of the webinar will be presented by Juan again. More to mention, both talks will be accompanied by an online presentation. The duration of the webinar will be around 45 minutes. Through the webinar, we have activated a chat in which you can write the questions you have. Some can be answered at this moment in the chat, and others our speaker will answer then at the end of the webinar, where there will be a more specific round of questions. With the participation in this webinar, you will be rewarded with a gift that I will explain how to get it later. Now it's Juan's turn.
Thank you, Bea, our marketing angel in this session. Thank you for your introduction. Thank you everybody for attending our webinar. I am Juan Fernandez. I am the CEO and founder of Tecknolab, and I will guide you through this webinar and through our presentation about reducing your application costs without reengineering. So let me try to pause here the presentation we are going to use, and let's start with the introduction. So we are going to do a quick introduction discussing about the application modernization challenges that we face in the different medium to large enterprises throughout the world. So what we're going to use, the graphics and most of the graphics you are going to see and you're seeing now in the left-hand side of the presentation are structured from a very interesting report that is a Capgemini application landscape report that has a very interesting view from different aspects of the application ecosystem that we see in the companies of the different sectors and different size. And I would suggest everybody to take a deeper look that we are going to see in this webinar today, but it's very illustrative of some of the topics, the key aspects we are going to show you. What we see, and independently of what the report says, everybody is pretty aware that large companies has a very complex set of applications and environments to manage, and it's typically pretty difficult because they are very variable. You have different architectures, different types of technologies to manage, different way of administering or handling all this, and every different ages and different types of architectures, different ways to evolve and to upgrade those environments. So at the end, it's a very complicated thing to deal with. And we also have a quite relevant what we call legacy factors. So as we are going to see later in this presentation, there are a very significant amount of applications that are in fact legacy applications that are potentially no longer evolved, and they are using old architecture concepts and old architectural frameworks, and well, we have to deal with. We have to manage them because we cannot retire those applications because they are providing some kind of useful functionality to the company. Irrespective of this, what we see, there is a common consensus in the industry that modernizing those applications is a really key strategic need. As we see in this graphic, 76% of the responses answer that this is an important or very important aspect in the organization. So it's something that we have absolutely, we need to talk about, we need to discuss, and we need to take into account, because we cannot compete in a so competitive market without keeping our applications modern enough, functional enough, and able to provide the new functionality we require to compete in the new aspects of our business, independently of what is our sector. So this is something that at the end falls out into the CIO competency and what they have to deal with every day. So the concerns that we see from the CIOs is that, well, they need to do something that is create competitive advantage for the business applying or using or leveraging new technologies, but at the same time, even more important, we have to do cost reduction. So the IT, the technology organization has to foster cost reduction both in technology itself and for the business operating daily. And the real problem of this is that we have to do this with scarce resources. We have to do this in organizations that typically has a clear underinvestment in IT and resources. We have some difficulties on the skills we have on the team, and potentially even lack of time, because we have to deal with all these scarce resources with ever-growing responsibilities and growing needs from the business. So this is the problem every CIO faces every day. So this is something that we have to deal with. In this new graphic, that's a little bit complex, but I will try to explain you the different aspects that we are showing here from this Capgemini application landscape report. Is that the maintenance cost that we see in the bottom side of the graphic grows as we increase the application age in our application landscape. So the older is the application, the more costly is their maintenance. This is something reasonable, expectable. We also see that, as we mentioned before, more than 50% of the application portfolio is more than 8 years old. So it's pretty old for at least from the technology typical time frame in technology that is much faster than in other industries. So so this is a problem. This is definitely a tough problem that we have to face related with the application modernization. We have to deal with a large bucket of old applications, potentially with old architectural frameworks and capabilities that we have to deal with. We have to modernize. The highest cost, in fact, it's concentrated in the mid-age, let's say. So if we see the blue line that is in the upper side of the graphic, we see that this is showing the cost of the portfolio of every section of the different sections of the different classifications of the applications by age that we have in the graphic. So 41% is in the, let's say, in the mid-age applications. So how we deal with this? How we do this regenerating, rebuild, adapt? What is the challenges we are going to face if we have to transform, modernize those applications. As we see here, we are going to face potentially very tough problems where in many cases, as we see in the three first and most frequent issues that are shown by the CIOs of the study, 30% of the cases we have lack of documentation. Directly, we don't know how the application exactly works in the inner side of it. And we have problems of skills because we potentially don't have the right skills for re-engineering, for going deep into the logic of the application and being able to understand exactly how we have to adapt it or modernize it. And in some cases, many cases, 26% is a very significant amount. We even don't have the source code. We don't have it. We don't have access to it. Okay, so it's very difficult to modernize an application if we don't have the source code. We have to build it from scratch, from the very beginning. In many cases, this is, in any non-trivial cases, this is a very complex thing to do, a very, very large effort. So how we can help with this? What is the capabilities we can provide into the market to help to solve these issues, to help our CIOs to provide some help. So what we propose is that in some cases we can transform without reengineering. We can help to do this without having this heavy lifting of changing completely our application and investing a significant amount of effort and time to modernize it. Let's go with a quick introduction on who we are. We are Tecknolab, and we are professionals with a long career in the IT, data storage, and virtualization in cloud industry. We have specialized in cloud and big data, and we provide those intelligent data management solutions that we're going to showcase here today briefly. We are in a startup, technology startup, and so our first flagship innovation product is what we call DB Cloud Bin, and is able to do, as we show in greater detail later, it's able to do transparent data management in large databases. So we are able to manage those large database repositories that we find in any large enterprise out there in a way that is very relevant and very significant in our point of view. Our solution is published in cloud providers, in Azure and Google Cloud, so it can be consumed directly from your Google or Azure contracts. And also we partner with the key enterprise storage manufacturers out of the world. So we have a partnership with the main and the most relevant in this industry. The innovation that we provide to the market is what we call data layering. Data layering is a data virtualization technique that we have created and is able to provide additional data management functionality into a database repository without re-engineering, without affecting the application that is using this repository. So if we see that very simple graphic we show here, in many cases we have an application that is using a enterprise database, as can be Oracle, SQL Server, or whatever, and it's storing data in this database for their specific application capabilities or requirements, and using SQL as the standard query language for accessing that data, for reading, writing, deleting, and querying that information. This is very the most common scenario in any application out there. So what we do is we automatically and transparently for the application, we create what we call a transparency layer. It's a very thin database data model automatically created after inspection of the native application data model with a very interesting property that is able to solve the same SQL operations that the original data model is able to solve with the same semantics. So if you execute a SQL query through the native application data model, it will give the same results that it will be received if you do the same query through the transparency layer. So with this capability, we can reconnect the application through the transparency layer without any change from the application. Any code change, is just a minor configuration setting and reconnecting the application through the transparency layer. So the application works as before, but the key difference is that using the transparency layer, what we are able to add is additional capabilities. We are able to add new functionality that the original application does not have. In this case, we are, for example, able to move data to external repositories. And we do this, for example, for efficiency, decoupling analytical process from the source data model, improving protection, reducing cost as the main and key benefits that we can face with this technique. But the key point is that the application will be able to access the same information through the same interface with the same logic, no matter if the data has been moved out from the database and externalized in an external repository. So this is exactly the key innovation that we have packaged in our product, is DB Cloud Beam, and we have used this technique in our solution for providing this capability to move data outside to an object store. So what we do is we create a transparency agent, that the layer that, as I mentioned before, is automatically wizard-based design, as you are going to see in a few minutes in our demonstration. And this transparency layer will, using an agent and that will work very closely with the transparency layer, is being able to move data outside the database to an object store using the different object store protocols that we have in the market. Most commonly is S3 protocol, that is the one provided by Amazon Web Services. That is some as a standard de facto, but we also support other proprietary protocols for different manufacturers, as we are going to see later. And we do this with complete security, transactionally consistent, and maintaining the security principles of the database, because we cipher the content while we move it outside outside the database, but creating a encryption key that is safely stored in the database with the same database credentials that we had before. So only the people or applications that have access to the original data model will have access to the clear information. This is also able to provide very significant values and very significant benefits if we apply the solution. The solution is very simple to deploy and configure, so it's very easy to implement it. And with that, we are going to be able to reduce costs, because the data we move out, it's typically binary data that is very heavy and it's very large in size. We are able to move this binary data outside the database, freeing up the database and keeping only the pure relational data in the database. So with that, we are able to reduce databases depending on the data model for 80 or 90%. And with that, we are going to reduce very significantly the costs, because the cost of a database infrastructure is much, much higher, several orders of magnitude higher than an efficient large-scale object store infrastructure. We're going also to be able to simplify the backup, because the data we move, the way we move it outside the database, we externalize that data in a way that it's self-protected, because we create replication, versioning, and purging mechanisms that are able to use this external repository as an intrinsic backup for that information. So we will only have to protect the data that remains on the database. Since we have reduced our database by 80%, we are going to also reduce and simplify our backup by 80%, and summing up into the cost reduction that we have seen later from the infrastructure. And also we're going to be able, potentially, depends very much on how the application is working, but we're going to be able to increase even the performance, because in that scenarios with smaller and more compact databases, the complex application, the complex queries that the application will generate will be much easier and efficiently performed by the database core capabilities. So this is in a nutshell the value we provide. The architecture of the solution is pretty simple, and we have a large set of deployment alternatives. We can, as I mentioned before, you can deploy it fully in the cloud, in the top cloud providers of the market. We natively support Azure Blob Store and Google Storage, as well as of course S3 in Amazon. We also support the main object store manufacturers for on-premises object stores, in the case that you prefer the deployment pure privately in a pure private cloud. And we support Oracle and SQL Server as the main database technologies that the solution is able to work with. Covering the most important and most common scenarios in the enterprise applications landscape that we see out there. So now is the time for a quick demonstration on how the solution works, and I will hand over into Alvaro, that's going to provide you with a quick demonstration of how the solution works in this scenario. Thank you very much, and we'll see you after this.
So thank you, Juan. I'm sorry, my screen. Okay, and this demo is based on a CRM solution. We have chosen for this case an open source CRM called OpenCRX, running over an Oracle database. Okay, and as other CRM solutions, it provides you a portal or a website where you can manage, well, different sales elements or typical sales elements like accounts or quotes or opportunities or leads. And in these elements, normally you can add or you can attach some binary content like documents or pictures. In this case, for example, for this demo, we have created a lead called demo, and we have attached some binary content. This picture, for example, well, it's the Calvin logo. Okay, And now to show you how the Tecknolab solution works, we're going to install it first, okay, through the wizard installer. Obviously, this is not the first screen of the wizard, but we have skipped the previous screen to try to speed up this demo, and because we don't want to steal you 2 hours of your time. So in the previous screen, you can configure some typical parameters like your database credentials, the object store connection settings, or the tables that you want to be managed by the Tecknolab solution. So if we click on the next button to start the installation process, now the wizard is analyzing and inspecting your database, and then it will create the transparency layer in a completely automatic way based on this analysis of your data model. And to end at the end of the installation process, the wizard will install the CLI tool and the agent. Okay, so now when the installer finishes, the only thing that we have to do to connect or to do that our application works together with the Tecknolab Beam is change or reconnect our application to use or to point to the new transparency layer created by the Tecknolab Beam installer. Okay, as this message shows us, the name of the new transparency layer is the original name with a suffix that is an acronym of Tecknolab Beam layer. So let's go to change it. Okay, to do that, we are going to go to our application configuration file. In this case, is the configuration file of OpenSeries, and this is the database connection area. Now the application is using this schema, the OpenSeries demo schema, because it's using an Oracle database. And the only thing that we have to do is to change it for this new one, create the transparency layer name created by the Tecknolab installer. Okay, so save it and start again the OpenSeries server. First stop it. Okay, and now start again. Okay, and while it starts, because it's not the fastest application in the world, I want to show you several things. First of all, the CLI tool. Okay, with this tool, we can perform some operations between our database and the object store. We can change the configuration settings of the Tecknolab solution, and also, in this case, we can perform this info command with the -s option to obtain information about our installation and perform a completely connectivity test between all the elements that are part of the solution. Okay, the database with the agent with the object store, and vice versa. And also the information that it shows us is, well, typical information about the version, the number of agents that are in this instance of the solution. In this case, only one for this demo, but normally you have more than one in a multi-node architecture, and also the tables that are managed by this installation. Okay, in this case, only this one, because it's the only table that contains binary content. Okay, and if we go back to the portal, to the OpenSeries portal, to perform the login, because it also takes a while. Okay, and now we are going to show you the OpenSeries database. Okay, if you remember the info command, the only table that is managed by the Tecknolab solution is this one, because it's the only table that contains binary content. And if we search for the row that contains the picture that we showed before from the portal, the OpenText portal is this one, Tecknolab being JPEG, and the important field here is this one, the content field, that is the blob type field that contains the binary content. Okay, now it's setting, all these rows are set into blob because it contains the binary content. So if we go back to the portal, now it's configured to use the transparency layer, and we are going to click again in the picture to check that everything works as before. Okay, the picture is so that is okay. But just now, right now, the data is still in the database. Okay, so we are going to move the data from our database with the command archive, also with the CLI, with the CLI, with the -clean option to remove the binary content from our database. The table, the target table that contains the rows that we want to move it, and our workflows to define the business rule or the criteria to move this data. For example, in this case, content name is the column name that contains the file name of the file that has a extension JPEG. If everything works fine, now it's analyzing. Whoops. Sorry. Now, this only one row is affected. There's only one JPEG picture is in the database. We move it, and if we go back to the database, we can check that right now the content column is set to null because the binary content is moved through the object store. Okay, and if we check again in the portal, now it's working through the transparency layer, and the data is not in the database, it's in the object store. The picture is so that's before, okay, and everything works fine. So that's all from my side. I left you with Juan to give you the final conclusions, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Alvaro, for your superb demonstration on our solution. Let me try again to provide you my final sentences on our presentation. We are running the final steps of this webinar. Thank you for everybody for it, and I will give you my key takeaways as a closing aspect. So what we have seen here is that application modernization is key as a business differentiation for our organizations or our companies to be successful in our everyday competing market. So this is a complete must for everybody. But sometimes, or in many cases, and especially now as we are going to see every time in this post-COVID era, the budget constraints are going to be a severe limiting factor. We are going to have to face budget restrictions even more deeper than we have seen in the past. And so what we can provide here, what we are providing here to the market is additional solutions for being able to freeing up that budget, avoiding consuming that budget while improving our application architecture and extending its lifetime and its value, because we are able to, let's say, do some level of re-engineering of the application without any re-engineering cost. And we think that is a very valuable proposition for our customers and prospects. So thank you very much for your time, and we are going to close. But before closing, I want to hand over again into Bea for providing you information on our gift, the gift you are going to have by attending this webinar.
Now is the moment to know what the gift is. It's a DB Cloud Beam subscription for 1 year and 1 terabyte for free by using the coupon. This coupon is the email with which you have registered in the webinar. In the link that appears here in the blue bubble, you need to register and get the promo using your coupon. This subscription is valid for any X3 storage. Thank you for attending, and I hope that you found it helpful. Now it's time to express any questions you have about this webinar. We have here our first question that said, in the solution, what happens if you want to move to the content back to the database? Juan?
Yeah, so thank you, Bea. So the question is what we have shown, and Alvaro has showcased the common scenario that is having content getting outside of the database to the object store in order to free up resources and free up our database infrastructure. What happens if we want to do the opposite thing, for whatever reason, okay? Because we want to move the content back to the database. So in order to keep the demonstration short, we have not showcased this scenario, but it's exactly the same operation that we have made for archiving. There is a command that's called restore that you can schedule and provide let's say the business rule that you prefer for defining what content and when you want to move back to the database, and the application is able, the DB Cloud Beam is able to take this content from the object store and, let's say, rehydrate and restore it in the database as it was before. In fact, this is the operation you have to do if you want to uninstall the solution. Okay, you can of course uninstall the solution in a way that is as simple as you can see and how you can install it. And we don't want to have any lock-in in our customers, so the customer does not have to integrate with any of our API provided by us. They don't have to integrate with any object store interface or protocol, and you can just simply uninstall our solution and restore the database as it was exactly before using the DB Cloud Beam, just restoring back your content into the database. So this is one of the operations that is absolutely available. So we are running out of time. We have 2 minutes more. I will answer directly additional questions that I'm seeing here in the QA. I have a question for Marta. That is, the demo seems a Windows environment. Does it work only in Windows? Well, the answer is no. The solution is completely available in both in Windows and Linux. It works exactly the same, with the small differences that you have in the different operating systems, but you have the same setup tool for installing the solution in your Linux environment. We have a supportability or compatibility matrix in the website that you can, of course, in the website of DB Cloud Beam, not the one we are showing in the picture in the screen right now. So you have a dbcloudbeam.com site specifically designed for consuming our DB Cloud Beam service, and there you have plenty of information, including the full compatibility matrix of the solution. We have also, I have just for one additional question time. So it's Eric is asking, when the application read the objects, are they stored back in the database? Why you say that you only have to back up the data that remains in the database? Well, answer the first question, that is simpler and easier. No, if the application reads through a SQL query the content that is externalized into the object store, we don't restore it back into the database. We do what we call a pass-through operation. So the content is just streamed directly straightforward to the application through the SQL connection. We only restore back in the application in the database, as we shown before, only if you explicitly request it through a CLI command. The second question is, I was very quickly talking about, the backup is simplified because you don't have to do a backup of the content that you archive or extract from the database. Well, the reason is that we generate several specific techniques, and we create several specific techniques for storing that content that provides an automated backup as valid as a backup that you can generate with any backup tool in the market directly from the object store, because we are dealing with object contents. We are dealing with binary contents that are treated as objects. And what we do is that we generate a unique identifier for every object that we move out. If the application updates that object and generates a new version, when we archive this content again, this content will not overwrite the original content. We'll just create a new copy, a new identifier with the new version of that object, and this is going to be stored in our database. So if you create a database backup with your favorite backup tool from 1 month ago, let's say, the identifiers you are going to have, the pointers that you are going to have, will point to the version of the object you had 1 month ago. So if you restore the backup, you are going to see the values of 1 month ago. So from a backup perspective and from a restore perspective, we are completely consistent. But also we are able to replicate the content. We are also even able to replicate the content in heterogeneous environments where, for example, the primary object store is on-site in any manufacturer, and the replica object store can be in the cloud, in Amazon, Google, or whatever, so that you have even a heterogeneous replica of our content. That is something very important from a backup and protection perspective. We are also, we don't delete directly the objects as when the application deletes an object from the database, we just mark the object for deletion in the object store, but we don't delete it. So you have the capability to delay that operation that we call purge, for being able to get it aligned with your retention period. So you have to retain the deleted content during, let's say, 1 year. You can purge the contents that have been deleted with more than 1 year. So we completely aligned your backup policies with the way we treat the content in the object store. So we have no more time. We're running out of time. Thank you very much for your attendance, and I hope it is interesting and you get interested on our solutions and the next solution that we're going to provide very soon. Thank you very much.